Hello everyone, my name is Ann, and I am so excited to share with you a great and wonderful opportunity that will help you to finally earn and enjoy a new and sustainable income as an affiliate marketer. And let me first start by saying that today I am currently an affiliate marketer with ClickBank because it's the number one known and most trusted affiliate marketing platform in the world. And as of this date in October 2019, ClickBank currently has over 1,000 millionaires on its platform. Now that's no scam, that's a fact. ClickBank has also paid over $3.5 billion in commissions to their marketers. So why should you also become a part of ClickBank? Is there still a real opportunity for you to make money online through this already very popular platform? And this is the reason why I made this new video, to assure you that yes, there is. A whole new opportunity is now being launched by the creators of ClickBank University that is turnkey for new affiliate marketers like yourself and of course like me too. I am about to take advantage of this new and incredible launch, and I would like to invite you to do the same. If you don't take this step today, you will only hear about it later. So open your ears and listen. Even though it will be a great opportunity for a while to come, it will not be as lucrative for you to maximize your earnings in the shortest amount of time possible to achieve your first and repeat sales. So let's get right into what this new opportunity is all about. ClickBank is launching an all-new affiliate product that will provide high commission levels of $1,000 per sale. That's right. When you make just one sale, even your first sale, you will have earned a commission of $1,000. Now remember, this is ClickBank. This is not some marketing guru advertising on YouTube or Facebook with some marketing masterclass or sales hack while taking your money and promising you the world. No, the makers of ClickBank University have a proven track record for years now, and its co-founder Justin Atlan are launching an opportunity that you can be a part of from the start. So keep watching this video to learn more, and be sure to click the link in the description to sign up to see a demonstration, and of course to download the $1,000 commission manual, all authored by ClickBank. This new product launch is entitled ClickBank Breaks the Internet, and Justin Atlan himself will show you how you can start earning up to $1,000 in commissions per sale without your own product, without any inventory, without an email list, without any special skills, by just making one sale. All you have to do is sign up today to learn and see why only selling $37 ebooks on the ClickBank platform may not be the most effective way to generate an online income if you want to make large commissions. It's a new opportunity for those who want to generate a significant high income quickly. Now, newcomers to the affiliate world can break into the big leagues and start earning super affiliate commissions. The affiliate marketing workflow for an online sale is very simple. You generate traffic to a specific online offer, and when a purchase is made, you earn a specified commission. Here's your invitation to participate in a webinar that is certain to change your life, a webinar promotion. Yet, it's very different from what you have ever seen or heard of in the past. I know that you may say, I can't do webinars. I'm afraid to even get in front of a camera, and I even hate the sound of my voice. The thought of hosting webinars are just not possible for me. That's just not where I am right now. Now, consider this. What if you could rake in the cash without dealing with technology, without spending days putting together the presentation, and without having to get hundreds of people on a webinar at a single time, and without suffering from stage fright? ClickBank has taken the concept of webinars and put it on steroids. It's designed especially for affiliate marketers and even newcomers to the affiliate world to be able to promote and stand behind a high-ticket turnkey digital product that earns high commissions in a way that has never been done before. You and I both know that webinars are easily one of the biggest cash generators on ClickBank and on the internet overall today. Webinars are the best way to sell high ticket products to thousands of people in less than an hour. And ClickBank has created something brand new that will launch in October 2019. It's a system that destroys the barriers that have been stopping anyone like yourself from succeeding with webinars. I know that I myself have never hosted one, and I would like to, but I wouldn't even have a clue of where to begin. And in this informational workshop, you will see a step-by-step demonstration of how easy it is to set up webinars with a few clicks instead of worrying about piecing together registration pages, thank you pages, and all that other technical stuff. What if anyone could set it up once and have it run again and again, generating you commissions as high as $1,000 per sales over and over again? All you have to do is get your free download when you sign up to see a demonstration of this amazing new platform for yourself. See how it works before you make any yes or no decisions. Remember, great life-changing opportunities will never just drop into your lap. You have to take the steps and go after it. Your free download and your attendance is all that is required to get you started. So see and clearly judge for yourself about this new opportunity on the ClickBank platform. That's why I made this video, because I am so excited to share it with everyone that I possibly can. ClickBank has found out a way to create a system that does away with all the barriers that have been holding people back so that you no longer have to focus on selling digital products that sell for only an average of $37. For the exact same amount of time and effort, you can start focusing on selling a completely new product system so that you can get used to generating $1,000 commissions on a regular basis, where you only need 5 to 10 sales in a single month to achieve up to $10,000 per month. It doesn't stop there. You will also learn how to automate the sales process. Whatever you're doing online, it is imperative that you know how to effectively automate your daily workflow. You're going to have access to a super affiliate sales funnel with the ability to start earning 4-figure commissions from a single sale, and you're going to be able to do it within an automated system. And by automated, I mean automated by software, not by doing everything manually or by having to hire people. You will be able to do it yourself from home and on your laptop. Done. You might be saying, yeah, but if it was that easy, then everyone would be doing it. Exactly. And soon that will be the case. So that's why you need to take action today. So what do you need to do to get started? Just be there and be one of the first affiliate marketers for this amazing product, because soon this open opportunity to fast and quickly make high commissions will be gone once it becomes well known and everyone has access to it. Simply click the link in the description to first sign up and watch an inspiring video from Justin Atlan and get fully prepared for this event when you download your free $1,000 commissions manual that will teach you all about this opportunity. And you too may be one of the newest ClickBank millionaires. So get ready to change your life in 2019. By 2020, this fresh, widely open opportunity will still be very much available, but a whole lot more competitive for newcomers to earn high commissions fast. So click the link in the description to get started today. Also, see the description for a direct link to join a Facebook group that provides an online support community for this awesome new platform so that you will only experience success with access to the latest tips, tools, and updates and strategies to quickly make your first, second, and even 20th sale so that you won't have to start your journey alone. Why not get it right the first time and change your life right now, right here in 2019. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the inside of this great opportunity. Before you click to sign up for this informational workshop, be sure to leave a comment and let me know down below what you are looking forward to most from your participation in this new affiliate platform from the makers of ClickBank, and then come back after you have attended and share your feedback. Please also give this video a thumbs up. And also, don't forget to subscribe. Hit the notification bell so that you can be notified of my new content. Also, leave a comment and let me know what you would like to see more of in my future videos on this channel. Have a great day, and be sure to leave any additional comments or questions that you have for me down below in the comment section, or you can contact me directly by email with any of your questions or concerns, and I'll see you in my next video.